On the evening of the 18th of June, 1815, the fighting outside a village in what is now Belgium finally stopped. Something close to 50,000 men lay dead or dying across a few square miles of trampled farmland. And within hours, while the wounded were still calling out in the dark, the scavengers arrived. This was expected. Battlefields were always stripped. Boots, buckles, coins, weapons, anything, a body no longer needed. But some of these men were not looking for boots. They moved between the dead with a pair of pliers and a small sack, and they were interested in only one thing. They were pulling out teeth. And here is the part that should stop you. This was not desecration for its own sake, and it was not rare. It was a trade. Those teeth were cleaned, sorted, shipped across the channel, and fitted into the mouths of wealthy men and women in London and Paris who wore them for years. The supply from that single battlefield was so enormous that Waterloo teeth entered the language as a selling point, a mark of quality, meaning young, healthy, strong. Dentists were still advertising the term decades later, long after the actual stock was gone. This is the story of what teeth were actually worth, and of the fact that for almost all of human history, whether you kept your teeth or lost them, and whose teeth ended up in your mouth came down to one thing: money. A quick warning before we go further. This one is grim, and every word of it is true. But before we get to the trade, we have to deal with what people believed was happening inside their own mouths, because it is one of the longest-running wrong ideas our species has ever had. For more than 4,000 years, across cultures that had no contact with one another whatsoever, the explanation for toothache was a worm. The earliest surviving reference is on a Babylonian clay tablet, written in cuneiform, which tells the story of a worm that asks to be allowed to live inside the gums and drink the blood of the teeth. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri describe it. Chinese medical texts describe it. It appears in Indian medicine, in Greek writing, in Roman writing, and it persisted through medieval Europe and into the 18th century. Everywhere people had teeth, they had the worm, and you can see exactly why. A tooth with advanced decay develops a dark hole in it, as though something has burrowed inside. The pain is a boring, gnawing sensation that feels precisely like something eating. And if you split open a badly decayed tooth, the soft pulp inside can look, to an unaided eye, disturbingly like a small, pale, wriggling thing. The theory fitted the evidence perfectly. It was simply wrong. The treatments followed the theory, as they always do. Since the problem was a living creature hiding in a hole, the answer was to drive it out or kill it. Patients were made to inhale smoke from burning henbane seeds directed at the tooth, and the seeds, when heated, release small pale fibers that fall out and look convincingly like tiny worms, which meant the treatment appeared to work every single time. There were charms to be spoken, poultices to draw the worm out, and remedies designed to tempt it into leaving voluntarily. 4,000 years of that. And it was not seriously dismantled until the 18th century, when a French surgeon named Pierre Fauchard examined decayed teeth carefully and reported that there was no worm in them, and never had been. Now, before you assume that everything before the modern era was equally hopeless, there is an inconvenient exception, and it comes from a surprising direction. Around 700 years before the Common Era, the Etruscans, in what is now Italy, were producing dental appliances of genuinely remarkable quality. Surviving examples show bands of gold, hammered into strips and riveted together, fitted around the remaining healthy teeth to anchor a replacement in a gap. The replacement was often a real human or animal tooth, held securely in place. These were not decorative. They were functional bridges. They were fitted precisely to individual mouths. And in terms of engineering, nothing comparable would exist in Europe again for roughly 2,500 years. Which upends the story most people carry in their heads. Dentistry did not begin badly and steadily improve. It reached a genuine high point, lost it almost entirely, and spent the following 2 millennia going backwards into worms and charms and the marketplace extraction stage. So let us return to the point where the market takes over. And to understand it, you have to understand why there was suddenly so much demand. Look at the skulls of medieval Europeans, or ancient Britons, or almost any pre-modern population, and something surprising stands out. The teeth are often in remarkably good condition. Worn down, certainly, a diet full of coarse bread ground on stone querns wore enamel flat over a lifetime. But the pattern of decay we recognize today is comparatively rare. Their diet had almost no refined sugar in it at all, and the bacteria that cause tooth decay feed on sugar. Then the sugar arrived, As sugar plantations expanded and imports rose, sugar moved from a rare luxury to a routine indulgence among the wealthy in Europe, and their teeth began to rot in a way no previous generation had experienced. It became so associated with the rich that blackened teeth were, for a period, a marker of status, a visible sign that you could afford to eat sweetly. There are accounts of people deliberately darkening their teeth to imitate the look. That fashion did not last. What replaced it was straightforward misery and a desperate demand. A wealthy person with a mouthful of rotting teeth wanted them out, and then wanted something to put back in. And so the trade began. The question was simply what to make the replacements from. The earliest and most common answer was ivory. Dentures were carved from the tusks of walrus, elephant, and above all hippopotamus, which was prized because it was dense and held its shape. A skilled craftsman could carve a full set that fitted the gums reasonably well. There was one enormous problem. Ivory is porous. It absorbs saliva and everything in it, and inside the warm, wet environment of a human mouth, it begins, steadily and irreversibly, to rot. Within months, an ivory denture would darken, soften, and start to smell. Contemporary accounts of people wearing them are not subtle about this. The odor was described as unbearable, and there was nothing to be done about it except to buy a new set and start the process again. Which is why the premium product, the thing everyone actually wanted, was real human teeth. Human enamel does not rot in the mouth the way ivory does, set into an ivory or gold base. Real teeth looked convincing and lasted far longer. They were, by a wide margin, the best option available, and that meant somebody had to supply them. The first source was the living poor. There was an open, entirely legal market in which a person short of money could sell their own front teeth to a dentist, who would extract them and set them into a denture for a paying client. Prices varied, but the transaction was straightforward. You were selling a permanent part of your body without anesthetic because you needed the money more than you needed to smile. The second source was the dead, and here the trade for teeth overlapped exactly with the trade for corpses. The same grave robbers who sold bodies to anatomy schools discovered that a single set of good front teeth was easy to carry, easy to sell, and far less likely to see anyone hanged. Teeth were the perfect contraband, small, valuable, and completely untraceable. And then, occasionally, history handed the trade a windfall, a battlefield. If the buried corners of our own history keep pulling you in like this, take a second to subscribe. Digging up the grimmest true stories our species has left behind is the entire reason this channel exists. And stay with this one, because the most famous set of false teeth in the world has a story attached to it that almost everyone gets wrong. A young soldier killed in battle is, from the point of view of a tooth dealer, the ideal source. He is healthy, he is young, his teeth have not had time to decay. And crucially, he is one of tens of thousands of bodies lying in an open field with nobody counting. The scale of what happened after major battles of this period is genuinely difficult to sit with. Teeth were extracted by the barrel load, boiled clean, sorted by size and shade, and sold on to dentists who set them into dentures for clients who knew perfectly well where they had come from and did not particularly care. Some accounts describe dealers following armies specifically in anticipation. That is why the phrase stuck. To advertise a denture as containing Waterloo teeth was not an admission, it was a boast. It told the buyer that these were the teeth of fit young men in their prime, not the worn stumps of some elderly pauper. The name became so effective as marketing that it long outlived the battle itself and was applied to teeth from anywhere at all. Now, the famous set. Because if you know one fact about historical dentures, it is probably this one, and it is wrong. George Washington did not have wooden teeth. He never did. Nobody in the 18th century made teeth out of wood, because wood in a wet mouth is a catastrophe. It swells, splinters, and rots almost immediately. The myth most likely comes from the appearance of his surviving dentures, which are heavily stained. The ivory had absorbed so much over time that its grain darkened into what looks, at a glance, like wood. What he actually wore was considerably grimmer. His dentures were assembled from carved hippopotamus ivory, lead, gold wire, brass screws, and human teeth. He suffered from dental problems for most of his adult life, and had lost nearly all his own teeth by the time he took office. And there is a documented detail that historians take seriously. Surviving account records from his estate include a payment made for a number of teeth purchased from enslaved people living there. What the records do not tell us is whether those specific teeth were used in his own dentures or resold, or what the people involved were told or able to refuse. A person in bondage cannot meaningfully consent to a transaction with the man who owns them. Historians differ on the details, but the payment is in the ledger, and it is a precise illustration of the whole system. Teeth moved upward, from the powerless to the powerful, and money moved down. So that is what went into the mouth. Now consider what it was actually like to wear. Early dentures had a fundamental engineering problem. Nothing held them in. There was no suction fit, no adhesive, no anchoring. Sets were often held together by springs designed to push the upper and lower plates apart against the gums, which meant the wearer had to keep their jaw actively clenched all the time, or the whole apparatus would spring open in their face. They were also almost useless for their supposed purpose. Biting into anything solid risked snapping the springs or the plate. Many wearers simply removed their dentures before eating, ate with their bare gums, and put them back in afterwards. The teeth were not for chewing, they were for being seen with, which tells you exactly what was being purchased, not function, appearance. The ability to sit at a dinner table and be looked at without shame while somebody else, somewhere, had permanently given up their own teeth so you could do it. And what if you were not wealthy? Then there were no dentures, and there was only one treatment for a diseased tooth. It came out. For most of history, this was not done by anything resembling a doctor. It was done by a barber, a blacksmith, or a traveling showman at a fair. Tooth drawing was public entertainment. The extractor would set up a stage in a marketplace, dressed flamboyantly to draw a crowd, sometimes with musicians. And there is a persistent detail in accounts of these performances. The drums and horns kept playing during the extraction, which had the useful effect of covering the noise the patient made. There was no anesthetic, there was no sterilization, there was frequently no real understanding of which tooth was actually the problem. The instruments themselves are the sort of objects that make modern dentists wince. The most notorious was the dental key, so called because it looked like a door key with a claw on the end. The claw was hooked over the tooth, the shaft braced against the gum, and the whole thing rotated sideways, levering the tooth out of the jaw. In competent hands, it was fast. In incompetent hands, which was most hands, it shattered teeth, tore the gum, and broke pieces off the jawbone itself. An earlier version, the pelican, worked on a similar principle and was, if anything, worse, and there was no follow-up. If the wound became infected, and it very often did, the infection could spread into the jaw, into the bloodstream, or into the tissues of the face and throat. In an era before antibiotics, a bad tooth was not a nuisance. Historical records list tooth infection as a genuine cause of death. Then, in the 19th century, industry found a new way to destroy people's jaws, this time at scale, and to people who had done nothing but go to work. Matches were made using white phosphorus. And the workers who made them, overwhelmingly women and girls in factories in Britain and elsewhere, breathed and handled phosphorus vapor for 12 or more hours a day in poorly ventilated rooms. The vapor attacked the jawbone. The condition was called Phossy Jaw, and it was horrific. It typically began with toothache and swelling. The jawbone underneath would then begin to die, forming abscesses that discharged foul-smelling pus. And in one of the most disturbing details in the history of occupational disease, the diseased bone would glow a faint greenish white in the dark. The only treatment was surgical removal of the jawbone. Without it, the infection could spread and kill. The employers knew. The condition was recognized, documented, and directly linked to white phosphorus, and safer alternatives existed and were already in use elsewhere. They were more expensive. In 1888, the matchwomen at one of the largest factories in London walked out over pay and conditions, in a strike that became famous and helped push the issue into public view. Even so, white phosphorus was not banned in Britain until 1910, more than 2 decades after the danger was beyond dispute. Girls lost their jaws so that matches could be made slightly more cheaply. So, what actually ended all of this? 3 things, and none of them were a change of heart. First, anesthesia. From the 1840s onward, ether and nitrous oxide meant that dental work no longer had to be a race against the patient's endurance. A dentist could take time, work carefully, and attempt to save a tooth, rather than simply tearing it out. Second, porcelain. Manufactured ceramic teeth could be produced in quantity, in matched shades, And they did not rot, did not smell, and did not require anybody to lose anything. The market for human teeth did not collapse for moral reasons. It collapsed because someone invented a product that was cheaper and better. The grave robbers and the battlefield scavengers were not stopped. They were undercut. And third, prevention, the slow, unglamorous work of fluoride, toothpaste, routine cleaning, and the simple idea that you might visit a dentist before something goes catastrophically wrong. That single change, more than any instrument, is why most people watching this will keep their own teeth for life. Which leaves the uncomfortable part, and it is not really historical. For almost the whole of human history, dentistry was not medicine. It was a market. Your teeth were an asset that could be sold if you were desperate, and taken if you were dead, and bought if you were rich. Whether you kept them, and what filled the gap when you did not, was a straightforward function of what you could pay. And that has not gone away as completely as the rest of this story has. Dental care remains, in a great many countries, the part of healthcare most likely to sit outside the system that covers everything else. The thing people delay or skip, or handle by having the tooth pulled because extraction is cheap and saving it is not. The battlefield scavengers are gone. The basic principle they operated on is still standing. So here is the question worth sitting with. We look back at a man wearing another man's teeth and find it monstrous. What will our descendants find monstrous about the way we decide who gets to keep theirs? Tell us what you think, down in the comments.